Released in 2017 by Team Cherry, a three-man indie game studio based in Adelaide, South Australia, Hollow Knight is a 2D game of exploration across the forgotten kingdom of Hollow Nest. Funded with the help of a very successful Kickstarter in 2014 and 2015, the game boasts of over 150 enemies and countless hours of gameplay, while weaving an emotional and symbolic story in the background. The game of Hollow Knight contains intentional gender diversity that challenges the player's understanding of gender stereotypes, romance, and the gender binary, which all culminates in a narrative that acts as a revolution against the patriarchal order, one of gender and void. This video essay naturally contains spoilers for the story and endings of Hollow Knight. In order to examine the way gender is conveyed within Hollow Knight and the way this representation challenges the heteronormative patriarchy, we will first contrast the designs of the male and female characters. Next, we will look at the various couples which inhabit the lore and the game events to see how marriage is represented within the game. Then, we will examine the intentionally genderless characters before deconstructing the ways these various features interact with the narrative to create an uniquely revolutionary theme within the game, something which adds greater understanding to what the void is within the world of Hollow Knight. When I did my first blind playthrough of Hollow Knight, I automatically gendered the first character that the player runs into, ELDERBUG. Despite not being gendered within the game, I had correctly gendered the bug as masculine. Towards the end of my playthrough, I was aware that I had been gendering characters and that the game designers had at times intended for this. However, when I ran into the character Grimm, I consistently misgendered them as feminine until I heard their voice. In Hollow Knight, gender is intentionally woven into the story, design, and voices of the various characters. But, as evidenced in my misgendering of Grimm, the game must have a method of gendering characters that is included within designs of the characters, such that when I run into Grimm, this in-game and cultural training fails me. When looking at the gender representation of Hollow Knight, it might come as a surprise that within the over 150 enemies in the game, only a handful of bugs are gendered. Also, the game is surprisingly equally split male to females. Yet how is gender conveyed through the character designs, and does it reflect trends found in other video games? A common criticism of modern games is that male characters have significantly more diversity in their body shape and sizes. Meanwhile, female characters are closer to being a cookie-cutter design. Ayla author wrote an article in 2014 on designing women in games, where she listed 3 common design traps that she's noticed female character designs fall into. The first thing she lists is, a woman can have armor as long as it shows her figure, expanding this further to be inclusive of the general design of the character. To showcase an attractive figure, we can look at the style of some of the Hollow Knight characters. Most of the female character designs do not seem to be explicitly designed to be attractive or gendered. However, there are a few that might qualify. The characters Marissa, Vespa, and the White Knight all have shoulder plates that curve upwards, paired with a narrow torso highlighting the bug's skinny shape. Ayla author's second point is that female characters must be noticeably feminine. This might, for instance, take the form of more traditionally feminine color palettes, as seen in designs of Lukewarm, Marissa, and Salabra, who use a lot of pinks and purples. The third item on the list is that women must appear to be akin to humans. This might be exemplified through the general anatomy of Cloth, Joni, and Eternal, who all at a glance can be seen as having human-like body structures. Yet, despite there being prime example of character designs that agree with Ayla author's list, there also exists a wide variety in the shape and sizes of the designs between each character, regardless of gender. Overall, the gender representation within Hollow Knight is evenly split where the characters are treated equally. However, the presence of a limited number of marriages and crushes provides an interesting commentary on the modern structure of marriage, while also challenging heteronormative expectations. The first couple the player comes into contact with is Cornifer and Zelda, who collectively manage the Knight's ability to have maps of Hollow Nest. While it is clear through conversations with each character that they care about one another's happiness, It isn't until the player has gained the ability to acquire all of the maps of the hollowness that the two are seen together. This traditionally heterosexual relationship is shown to be one of mutual love and respect, with the main issue being their separation from each other during Cornifer's travels around the kingdom. Even lamenting how Cornifer's exhaustion from traveling the land has caused him to fall into a deep slumber upon his return, Iselda impresses on the player that she loves him when she says, but I do love the bug, even his faults. A different character engages with the realities of romance in a very unique and impactful way. Upon saving the bug, BRETTA, from the fungal wastes, she becomes entranced by the knight and develops a crush on her savior. She denotes this in her diary entries when she writes about the white savior. Later, when Zote returns to Dirtmouth, BRETTA moves on from the knight who showed her no attention and onto Zote, regarding him as a powerful prince. An interesting yet important message is delivered when Zote's power has been diminished in her eyes. BRETTA realizes that neither the knight nor Zote are partners who she would spend a lifetime with. This is summed up when BRETTA writes, her grey prince diminished and her white savior revealed as beast. The maiden at last understood the truth. Her life's companion would not appear, for they could not appear to a maiden sat idle. She must instead seek them out, must find her love, and free them of their solitude. This text tells the audience they shouldn't expect to stumble upon love without work. All of this is carried through a bug who has two crushes during the course of the game, neither of which are shown to be truly reciprocated. While the two most visible relationships lean characteristically towards being heterosexual relationships, the game disrupts the stream through the remaining couples that exist within Hollow Knight. There are 3 homosexual relationships that are shown to exist within the game world. Unfortunately, all of them play with a common trope: bury your gays. The clearest homosexual relationship is the lesbian couple Ismar and Lemur, who are more commonly known as the Grey Mourner and the Trader's Child. When the knight talks to Lemur, the player learns that the couple was unable to be together due to Lemur's tribe, and that since their parting, Lemur has died. It is only in delivering the delicate flower to the ghost of Lemur that Zemar can rest knowing that she has been able to express her lasting love to her spouse. Another implied homosexual couple is the Nailsmith and Nailmaster SHEO. After the Nailsmith forges the pure nail for the knight, he stands outside of his hut and requests that the knight kills him. It is only if the player refuses and spares the nailsmith that he will find his way to SHEO's hut and forge a relationship. In this instance, the role of the bury your gay trope exists in the choice the player had to make in order to facilitate this relationship. Finally, there is the character Claw. Within the game, Claw seems to be trying to face her fears of the creatures of Hollow Knight in order to make her departed spouse, Nola, proud. As Nola's name is traditionally feminine, whether intentional or unintentional, this relationship ends up being another lesbian couple separated by death. Interestingly, this means that the majority of the couples that the knight and the player comes into contact with are gay couples. Unfortunately, each of them are intrinsically linked to death and the bury your gay trope. Cade Somers explains that the bury your gay trope is a trope used to describe instances where LGBT characters are often given tragic storylines that end in their death. As a consequence, this trope can perpetuate the idea that LGBT people are not meant to have a happy ending. So while I do not believe that it was Team Cherry's intention to play into this harmful trope, the fact that the trope can be found connected to each of the gay relationships in the game is an unfortunate drawback to the amount of LGBT representation that Hollow Knight possesses, and the way their experience within the game challenges heteronormativity. This leaves 2 remaining romantic and sexual relationships within the game. One comes in the form of the Obols, a dual boss found in the Colosseum of Fools. The only thing known about this couple is that they mate for life, and will become enraged when their spouse is killed. This can be seen to reinforce the social expectations of people marrying for life, but beyond this, there is little to know about the Obols. Finally, the last relationship found within the lore of the game revolves around the Pale King, the White Lady, and Hera the Beast. In this instance, the game explains that the Pale King and the White Lady were the king and queen of Hollow Knight. Through them, all of the vessels were created. Meanwhile, in a deal struck between Hera the Beast and the Pale King, she was allowed to copulate with them and have the child Hornet. This relationship and exchange can be seen to reflect the way sexual acts and offspring are used as methods of exchange. It isn't hard to see how this might be reinterpreted through the modern issues that surround the power struggles involved in engaging with sex in return for some other service. Yet, while the real world may not normally reflect this reality, it seems that within the world of Hollow Knight, all three individuals are sympathetic to the needs that required this exchange. This is the point where Hollow Knight shows the way it intentionally moves beyond the gender binary and makes this a central feature of the narrative. When we first examined the way the game gendered various characters, it wasn't entirely clear if this was an intentional decision for story reasons. After all, it isn't that challenging to claim a character is male or female, or even to create design choices that reflect this reality. But the game moves beyond the heteronormative patriarchy by pointing out that the playable character's status as a gender is important to the story. Meeting the White Lady for the first time, the player can learn a lot of lore about the knight and the world of Hollow Knight, and it's here that the importance of gender is called out the most, when she says, referring to Hornet, "It faced the gendered one?" Other pieces of dialogue throughout the game references the knight, Hornet, and the Hollow Knight as siblings through the Pale King, but this line of dialogue highlights that Hornet is the only offspring of the Pale King to have a gender, the only one to be the gendered one. As a result, the player can come to the conclusion that all of the vessels created by the Pale King and the White Lady in order to fight their enemy, the Radiants, are genderless. The intentionality of this is even reflected in the way that the game went through development. The knight was first introduced through Kickstarter as a character who used he/him pronouns. Yet it is clear that as Team Cherry constructed their story and the lore of Hollow Knight as a struggle between the Radiants and the Pale King, many modifications were made. Evidence of this change can even be found within the game developer notes. Titled Gender Notes, Team Cherry writes that Hollow Knights have no gender check for him and his. Notably though, the vessels are the only characters who are confirmed to be intentionally agender. However, interestingly, of the creatures that count as void beings, none of them have a confirmed gender. Here, the importance of the void within the story of Hollow Knight and the way this influence can be read through a gendered lens can create interesting implications. The Knight, the Hollow Knight, and the other vessels are stated to be the byproduct of the Pale King, the White Lady, and the Void, with the purpose of creating a being able to contain the infection that the Radiant inflicts on hollowness. During the struggle, the Pale King had trouble creating a vessel that was hollow and thus able to contain the Radiance completely. It is implied that the Void does not mean the absence of mind or will, yet the status of being agender or not having a known gender due to the Void remains. There is an interesting finding in the Gender Census 2021 Worldwide Report, which serves as a survey of individuals whose genders defy the binary. This finding was that terms and phrases related to labeling one's gender as void, gender void, or similar existed for more than 1% of the responses. This finding connects to the way that agendered and non-binary individuals might feel that their gender, or lack thereof, is akin to a void. Using this real-world survey, we might be able to say that the void within the world of Hollow Knight represents the absence of gender, as opposed to the higher beings of light who possess gender. Narratively, the void serves an interesting role through the night. Beaumont explores this in their paper, Hollow Knight, Authoritarianism and the Individual. This paper interrogates the way the beings of light, the Pale King and the Radiance, fight over how to control the individual. As two institutions trying to control the lands of hollowness, they implement hierarchical forces that seek to create structure and authority. Beaumont describes this struggle, and the void in particular, in this way. The void represents more than anything freedom from authority. It gives the power to destroy gods. The light is controlling and creative. It may possess the mind, but it also erases the individual. The void is liberating and destructive. It is mindless raw power with no concept of either society or individual. Within this video's essay's analysis though, The void in the knight serves the additional role of being a fight against a world that expects gender. In the same way, by defeating the Radiance at the end of the game, the player has effectively used the power of the agendered void to ultimately supersede the patriarchal world that expects each individual to possess a binary gender and allow for something new to form in the absence of this requirement. Through the game's design of the gender characters, the presence of multiple gay couples, and the role of the agendered knight, Hollow Knight embraces the diversity of those who struggle with the expectation that many individuals face in the real world.